Good morning. All right. Elk Mountain Mission, Chapter 14. It's called Official Correspondence. Last time, we saw how Oliver Huntington was undermining the leadership of the mission, while the Sherbick Utes, I think just the Utes in general, were trying to make peace treaty with the Navajos, and were able to come to an accord there in the Elk Mountain Valley. Official correspondence. This is today's reading. On August 13th, Ethan Petit wrote in his journal, 8 or 10 Indians came in today with St. John. 4 of them were strangers from beyond the Elk Mountains. They'd found a breastpin that Spuds had lost and thought we had fixed something up to kill them all off, such as their superstitions. The Indian called Spuds was a sandpitch Ute who had been in the valley with Arapeen a week earlier. None of the other journal keepers mentioned this incident, so it was probably not a concern. However, this is one of the first indicators that strangers to the valley might have been trying to stir up trouble. A breastpin. Huh. Yeah. They're trying to use these things as excuses to start fights. That's not good. The Mormons finished their gate for the fort on August 17th. John McEwen wrote, "It is 8 inches thick, made of cottonwood logs hewn out of 4 inches thick wide and pinned together crossway." He also said, "A great many of the natives arrived today by the north entrance to the valley. There were Indians that had been there before, said to be members of White Eye's band. White Eyes was a Ute chief from the Uinta Basin. Sunday, August 19th, was a day of celebration for the mission. 3 of the men who had gone to the settlements on July 19th returned that day with mail and supplies for the camp. John Lowry, John Crawford, and Stephen Moore were back. Alfred Billings said the men were a joyful sight, for we had been looking for them for a long time. The men had been gone exactly a month. With the mail, the travelers brought a letter from Brigham Young, dated August 6th. It was the church president's first epistle to the new colony. Amazingly, Alfred Billings had sent his first letter to Brigham Young on August 10th, in the care of Arapeen. The letters had passed each other on the trail. From things Brigham Young said in his letter, it is obvious that he had already received news of the mission, probably verbally from William Holden, second counselor in the mission president. Holden had been one of the 8 men to leave the mission on July, who didn't return with the mail carriers. Brigham Young's letter said, President's Office, GSL, meaning Great Salt Lake City, August 6th, 1855. Alfred Billings, dear brother, it gives me such much joy and pleasure to learn, by reports of the boys of the Elk Mountain Mission, the warm reception of the elders of Israel by the remnants of Joseph in that locality. And the Lord has been pouring out his Spirit upon them abundantly through visions and dreams, thereby preparing them to receive the gospel of the Son of God, which is able to save them. Seeing that the Lamanites have thus extended to you all the cordiality and sympathy that could be expected from the red men, I hope that the elders will ever walk and act before and among them in a manner so that the natives' confidence reposed may increase instead of diminishing, that the leathered and pelted and forlorn sons of Jacob may begin to realize that the God in which their fathers trusted and obeyed is their friend if they keep his commandments, and that the saints in every deed are their only true friends and brethren. In preaching to any class of people, the preacher should be careful to manifest to all that the principles he advocates have their weight upon his own character, by walking day by day in humility and singleness of heart before the Lord. In so doing, he discharges his duty to his God and brethren, and honors the priesthood which he has received for the salvation and exaltation of the human family. I have a word of counsel to give in relation to this mission, and it is to branch out and scatter yourselves among them. Go where they go, live with them and among them, to show them by every act of your lives that you love them, and that you live among them, to benefit their condition by showing them how to live without fighting and stealing from each other and the white man, in trading with them, which you will have the privilege of doing as we do here. Be strictly careful not to cheat or defraud them, but act towards them as you would wish them to act towards you under similar circumstances. The weather has for some time been unusually warm and dry, and crops suffer miserably for the lack of water. Today there is somewhat the appearance of rain. A shower would do good to potatoes and other vegetables, owing to sultry weather, and perhaps impropriety in dieting. There is a little sickness among the people, but the mortality had been light. Peace and prosperity attends the labors of the saints, and though prospects looked dark for a while in relation to breadstuffs, yet I believe an ordinary crop will be realized. Hoping that the Spirit of the Lord may rest upon you, and there associate and rest upon the mission, I remain your brother in the gospel, Brigham Young. P.S. I mean by going among the Indians and with them, to go where there is an opening and you can go in safety, and should you require help, Brother David Evans and others of his company are in readiness should you require them. Let me know at your earliest convenience. Obviously, Brigham Young had been told about Chief St. John and his dreams, visions, and talks with the Great Spirit. From this letter, we know that Brigham Young saw nothing unusual about this and counted it as a heavenly manifestation that served to justify the purpose of the mission. His admonition about treating the natives fairly closely mirrors his advice to William Huntington's exploring party of the previous year. In his counsel to go among the Indians and live with them, go where they go and do what they do, he was asking them to do what Jacob Hamblin had done successfully among the Paiutes near Santa Clara. President Young was offering sincere and hopeful advice, but apparently he didn't fully understand the great cultural divide between the humble Paiutes of the Rio Virgin and the mounted, mobile, and more warlike Sharebeck Utes of the Elk Mountain Valley. Thankfully, his postscript, go where there is an opening and you can go in safety, let some of his devoted followers off the hook. If not for the final word, a few more of the mission's obedient saints might have become martyrs. The word that Brother David Evans and others of his company are in readiness, should you require them, suggests that reinforcements were available if Allred Billings thought he needed them. David Evans was a bishop and mayor of the town of Nephi in the Sanpete Valley. He was called to lead the White Mountain Mission to Nevada. At the same time, Alfred Billings was called to lead the Elk Mountain Mission. The White Mountain Mission had been recalled in July due to unfavorable environmental conditions. Yeah, it's Las Vegas. Anyways, dude, Nevada is such a forlorn state. Practically the best parts of Nevada are the easternmost parts of California. And Las Vegas is only there because of the Saints and them able to make dams and build out of the desert a place to live. Just look at St. George. Look at Moab. Unfortunately, something tells me that Moab is going to collapse just because of the foreshadowing of the book. But, yeah. It's amazing to me that the Saints are so good at making the desert a living place. Just a moment here. All right. The letter from Brigham Young was read aloud to the missionaries, and then read to a delegation of Elk Mountain Utes. John McEwen reported meeting in afternoon. The natives were called in, and President Brigham Young's letter read to them. They felt good and said that the comments of the letter would lay heavy on their hearts. We're glad to hear that we intended to go with them and live, travel, and teach them. Alfred Billings' letter from Brigham Young reads as follows. Elk Mountain Mission, August 10th, 1855, to Brigham Young, President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So remember, these letters passed each other as they were being sent. Dear Sir, by the politeness of Arapine, we give you a few items upon the condition of affairs in this region. Ever since we left your city, the blessings of God have attended us both in our journeyings and our labors here to an almost astonishing degree. We are all snugly stowed in stone houses inside the fort. The finishing job of our fortification is the gates, which are now in operation. Our corn and vines look excellent. Vines in full blossom, corn beginning to tassel. Wheat looks well, but much of it has been eaten of twice or three times by our own and Indian horses. Oops. The health of the company is good without exception. Our valley swarms with natives from every direction, for the news of our arrival and undecipherables, and there's something undecipherable here in the letter, has run like fire, and as fast as they could get word, they run to see and make friends. All are friendly, and 15 have been baptized of the Tabby-Watts living on the other side of the mountain. So, let me see here. For the news of our arrival and has run like fire. News of our arrival and fort? News of our arrival and settlement. That's my guess at what the undecipherable is. But that's just going off of a blank. Who knows how long that really is. The most of the Indians who have stayed, for there are every day going and coming, long enough to get acquainted, we find to be more honest, honorable, and manlike than we have yet been acquainted with. Arapine has done us much good and very essential service to the work. He has preached and taught among his nation all the time. His labors have been increasing by day and night. When we came here, the Navajos and Utes were at war. He, Arapine, has been to the Navajos and made peace with them, brought 2 of their chiefs here, and we've entered into such friendly arrangements that the way is now open that we can go among them, and for which they are anxious. In fact, nearly every band of Navajo wants some Mormons to be sent to live with them, for they have a better valley than this. The Navajos are a very different race or tribe from any we have before seen. They are somewhat neat and comely for Indians. They are now, at this moment, about starting on their return, and Arapine is getting up his horses to start for the settlements. They all leave with the best of feelings. Peace prevails universally. We killed an ox upon their arrival for the entire benefit of our red brethren in general. With most sincere regard for your welfare and the cause of Zion in general, we have the honor of remaining your servants in Christ. Alfred Billings, President, Joseph Rawlings, Counselor, O.B. Huntington, Clerk. It is surprising that Alfred Billings would tell Brigham Young 15 Indians have been baptized of the Tabby-Watts living on the other side of the mountains. 15 Indians had been baptized on July 22nd, but William Pace, the only man to record who the 15 were, said they were Sherebecked from the Elk Mountain Valley, including several leading men among them, a brother of St. John and family, 2 of the St. John's sons. That the mission president didn't seem to know who he had baptized, and his first counselor and scribe, who also signed the letter, didn't correct him, is inexplicable. After Brigham Young's letter, Alfred Billings wrote a response and sent it with Joseph Rawlings, his first counselor in the mission presidency, on August 21st. Elk Mountain Mission, August 21st, 1855. To President Brigham Young. Beloved Sir, I received your letter dated August 6th, which was perused with much satisfaction, both for the privilege of hearing from the saints whom I love, and for receiving instructions with regard to the welfare of this mission, which I will always thankfully receive. Brothers Lowry, Moore, and Crawford arrived here on the 19th. Everything is prosperous with us. Have we had abundance of rain? have had abundance of rain for the last 2 weeks. Our crops are quite limited and probably will not realize more than a plenty for seed of corn. Wheat, buckwheat, oats, and potatoes. Corn is well silked, potatoes rather slim. Indians continue very friendly, and our acquaintance and friendship extend wider and wider every day. The health of the company is perfect. Brother Rollins, the bearer of this letter, will make known more fully that I can write than I can write of the necessities and wishes with regards to more brethren being sent out here. Brother Rollins will also speak with you about making an appropriation for the benefit of the Indians who come to visit us. Alfred N. Billings, President. This letter reveals for the first time that the mission crop was expected to be a failure. Surprisingly, this was not mentioned in any of the journals, yet it was a serious situation. The missionaries would soon be facing their first winter in the valley, and the food that they had brought in their wagons was not enough to carry them through. They had been feeding a lot of Indians, and 41 hard-working men consumed a lot of calories. They would surely need wagon loads of flour, beans, and bacon to see them through until spring. 2 other items are revealed here that are not found anywhere in the journals. Alfred Billings was asking for more men to be sent to the valley, and he was asking for funds from the territorial legislator to help feed and care for the natives, in light of the fact that he was dealing with hundreds of Indians from many different tribes on a weekly basis. Both requests were reasonable and timely. On the afternoon of August 20th, William Hamblin, younger brother to the famous Paiute missionary Jacob Hamblin, arrived in camp alone. He had made the 200-mile trek from Manti to the mission by himself, evidently missing the departure of the other 3 men who returned a day earlier. He had been 4 days on the trail, the last day without food. In 1855, it took a lot of brass for a white man to travel a Spanish trail alone like that. Young William Hamblin was surely as brave and as bold as his famous brother. 4 of the 8 men who left the mission on July 19th never went back. They were William Holden, William Carroll, James Ivey, and Christopher Columbus Perkins. It is unfortunate that William Holden didn't return. As a member of the mission presidency, his counsel and reassuring presence might have made a difference in the way things turned out. Love the foreshadowing there. All right, so we have pictures of William Hamblin, William Holden. So William Hamblin made his way to the mission, while as William Holden, who was one of the counselors, didn't return. And then there's a Ute chief carved on the rocks in the southeast Utah. Note the spear and long flowing headdress. So here are those pictures. Lena! Yes? I'm awake. I've been awake. Oh, good. Thank you. All right. Oh, and there are no real notes for this chapter at all. We have pictures of Isaac Morton Behunin, Robert Brown, William Freeman, John H. Lewis, Thomas Wilson, Christopher Columbus Perkins, David Thompson, Andrew Jackson Allred, and John Crawford. So here are their photos. Chapter 15. Homeward bound, I wish I was homeward bound. So let's go ahead and read that. It's actually a very tiny chapter. Lured by a false sense of security following the recently made Indian treaty, Alfred Billings believed what he told Brigham Young in his letter of August 10th, peace prevails universally. Wrapped in that warm blanket of hopeful sentiment, the mission president allowed another 15 men to go home. On August 21st, the day after William Hamblin, John Lowry, John Crawford, and Stephen Moore were all safely back in the fold, 40% of the mission's remaining membership were granted leave. They were Joseph Rollins, Gregory Metcalf, Robert Brown, Moses Draper, John Shelley, Oliver Huntington, Lot Huntington, Thomas Wilson, Elma Fairchild, William Pace, John Ivey, John Lewis, Martin Behunin, David Thompson, and Archibald Buchanan. No one knew it at the time, but none of them would be back. So, were all the people that we were picturing here those that left? Joseph Rollins, not on there. And there's 12 pictures, so Martin B. Hoonan, David Thomas. Yeah, I think it was. Okay, so the departure of those 15 men left 22 missionaries to guard the fort, tend the farm, and do God's work among the multitude of Indians. The good men who stayed believed they were up to the task, but their efforts were spread thin. It is surprising that Alfred Billings allowed both of his counselors and his clerk to go home at the same time, leaving him the sole member of the mission presidency. His second counselor, William Holden, had remained in the settlements following his July 19th departure. First counselor Joseph Rollins and clerk Oliver Huntington were leaving with this second group. John McEwen would eventually be appointed clerk pro tem, but neither counselor was ever replaced. The reasons for the men leaving were many, but most expected to be back within a month with fresh supplies for the mission. The Indian trade had bored deeply into the supply of food, material goods, and personal possessions of the missionaries held dear. To maintain the Indian trade at the level the men had become accustomed to, a good supply of new trade goods would need to be imported. Oliver Huntington elaborated. We had all done a great amount of trading with the natives, and had clothed ourselves mostly with buckskins, and had got many horses, so that nearly every one of us had a horse. In doing this, however, we had parted with shirts, blankets, powder, lead caps, and even guns, until we needed to go home and get a new supply for trade. From this, it's obvious what Oliver and Lot Huntington were going home to do. Many, if not most, of the others probably had the same idea. Allen, the Huntington clan member who could speak Ute, remained at the fort with both of the designated traders, William Holden and Gregory Metcalf, gone to the settlements. It was Allen's time to shine as the Indian trader. I'm a girl. You knock down what I'm reading to people. So, hey, cat attack. Oh, my goodness. You little goober. Come here, you. Rawr. Sorry for the attack by cat. Wah. Here, I need you off the table, dear. You're either in my lap or off the table. All right. So it was Allen's time to shine as the Indian trader. The 15 men going home left the mission on the afternoon of August 21st. Ethan Petit recorded, wrote letters to send home. The boys left at 1 p.m., feeling first-rate. The homebound party camped the first night at what William Pace called Quinny Rock Springs, or Courthouse Springs now. Both journal keepers say they had trouble with the horses that night. Most of the horses were Indian ponies that were not well broken. The men had to post a strong guard around the horse herd to keep them from running off. William Pace wrote, had some little trouble with some of our animals, some thus being wild at night. I stood guard with Joseph Rollins and others around the horses. Oliver Huntington said, we had mostly sore-backed old horses and young colts, but all served well after getting fairly underway. The next day, the men traveled an impressive 36 miles to the Green River, crossed over, and camped on the west bank. The tired horses gave them no trouble that night. The following day, August 23rd, the party split up. 5 men from the Sanpete Valley chose to go by the old route, across the Elk Mountain cutoff to Huntington Creek, then over the mountain to Manti, following Arapine's trail. The remaining 10 took the Spanish Fork Trail to Utah Valley. Gregory Metcalf and Lot Huntington would act as guides, having been over the trail before with William Huntington's exploring party. William Pace wrote, traveled 30 miles to Duchesne Fork of Green River and camped. Water muddy and grass poor. Actually, they had traveled 30 miles and camped on Price River near Woodside. Their supposed Duchesne River was in fact the Price River, mislabeled by William Huntington the year before. Having been with William Huntington, where the mistake was first made, the trail guides continued to think they were following the Duchesne River. The men didn't give details of the route taken on this particular day, but a month later William Sherritt and others followed their tracks and described their route. Instead of following the old Gunnison Wagon Road through Cottonwood Wash, the travelers turned north just a few miles west of the Green River, and followed the future course of today's Highway 6 and the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. The 2,000-foot vertical wall of the Book Cliffs loomed over their right shoulders, all the way to the Price River and beyond. It would have been a long, dusty, dry stretch of travel, but the shortcut probably saved them 10 or 12 miles of travel. Following William Pace's journal the next day, August 24th, the men found Gunnison's wagon road again and traveled 6 miles to the first crossing of the Price River, probably somewhere near Coon Spring. Then on the north side of the river, they traveled 10 miles to Whitbeck Creek, which is Grassy Trail Creek now. After lunch, they continued another 8 miles up Grassy Trail Creek to Clark's Valley, where they camped for the night, probably near the Sunnyside Junction of the intersection of Highway 6 and State Road 123. The next day, they traveled 8 miles back to the Price River near Wellington. Here, the Gunnison Trail bent southward out of Price River drainage towards Huntington Creek and Salina Canyon. From this point, they were following the path of High Forehead. William Huntington's faithful Indian guide had showed them the previous December. They went up the river 7 miles, crossing several deep ravines. The journal doesn't specify if they crossed the river at the second crossing near Wellington or on which side of the river they were traveling. It does say they continued up the river 15 miles to some high bluffs where they camped for the night along the river. The high bluffs, near the mouth of Gordon Creek, just south of Carbon County Golf Course. The next day, August 26th, they crossed a ridge and continued up the river 8 miles to the confluence of Willow Creek, which they called Right-Hand Fork of Duchesne River. Oops. Highway 191 follows Willow Creek today. 2 miles up Willow Creek, they shot a mountain sheep and stopped to cook them for lunch. Oliver Huntington said they were short on rations. William Pace said they reached the top of Willow Creek 10 miles and camped in the tops of the mountains. They were now in Emma Park, a flat expanse of smooth ground between the Book Cliffs and Reservation Ridge. Following Emma Park, the men journeyed 8 miles west to the left branch of the Duchesne River. Again, it's Price River, near the top of Price Canyon. Then over some hills 8 miles to a creek, White River Creek. After lunch, they continued 5 miles to the rim of the basin, which is now the rim of the basins for Soldiers Summit, where they dropped down into Spanish Fork Canyon, following the course of today's Highway 6. They reached Spanish Fork on August 31st. Of their return home, Oliver Huntington wrote in his journal, "My horse gave out 3 days before getting in, and I had to go on foot and drive him to the mouth of Spanish Fork Canyon, where I left him within 8 miles of Hobble Creek, which is in Springville. And then the Indians stole him. I reached home on the 31st of August, poor, ragged, worn, and emaciated, having eaten little for the last month and undergone many hardships. My beard had not been cut since leaving home in the spring, and which now was very long, which, when cut all off, gave me a cold which terminated in the quinsy, which is tonsillitis." So there you go. Again, the idea of staying warm instead of cold, otherwise you catch a cold, is obviously present in his thought. Instead of, I've been off in my own independent colony, now that I'm returning to a population that has diseases coming among it, of course I was going to get sick. But the 5 men who traveled to the Elk Mountain Cutoff and Arapine's Trail reached Manti without incident. I'm looking over the notes for the chapter, and it's just talking about why Spanish Fork is named Spanish Fork. It's for the Spanish explorers who entered Utah Valley from the canyon in 1776. The widely circulated Oliver Huntington Journal perpetuated the mistake of calling the Price River Duchesne River. Yeah. And there's a picture. Native American Travel Registry, Southeast Utah. It has the painted on hands. Quite the travel registry. Next is the Alfred Billings Trading Company. That'll be interesting. Kind of worried about that, because Alfred Billings was one of those that wanted to be the traitor. He was the one Oliver Huntington was like, oh, Alan should be the one to do everything. Oh, well, I guess Alfred Billings is different than Alan. But Alan, it was going to be Alan's time to shine, is what they said earlier here. So, we shall see how this all ends up. Something tells me it's not going to go good. But it is an important thing to try and ascertain what went wrong, so that way, if ever you need to understand, be aware of, and try not to have the same thing repeat. Which I know is weird, because it's not exactly like the president of the church is calling members of the church to go and settle new colonies and teach among natives. The most we have now is calling missionaries to new places and teaching the gospel only, not colonizing any place. It's really just trying to teach people the culture of the gospel. And in fact, I think, I don't know, I look at those people who are called to the quorums of the 70 who speak in general conference, that talk about their experiences of being like members in these far off places, or kind of the first members of the church in that area. And I'm always stunned how thoroughly they truly get the idea of and importance of the culture of Jesus Christ. And that's usually kind of an emphasis of their talks. And they know very well what it means to sacrifice, to build up the kingdom of God in their region of the world. The times where like they serve as bishop for 7 years, and they're like, them and their wife are the only people that are truly like doing everything for those of the ward, whether that's, funeral services and this service and that service and that service. They're just constantly giving. But they do so cheerfully and with a humble heart. It's conference talks like that make me realize that no matter where you're from, you can absolutely understand and adopt the culture of Christ. The question that I have is, were they already prone to the culture of Christ? Or did they truly get the vision of the culture of Christ as they worked with the missionaries, or as they read the scriptures? Because sometimes I think, they did that survey. There was a conference talk where they did a survey, and they found that most of the members of the church who joined didn't really understand exactly what the missionaries were talking about all the time, but they knew that they felt the Spirit, and they decided to join, which is wonderful. There's a lot to be said about that. It first relieves the missionaries from worrying all the time about, did I screw up? But at the same time, it's a huge blessing to see how the Lord's Spirit is really guiding and directing the work a lot better than any of us could, which is, again, another blessing. At the same time, it helps me go, maybe missionaries need to work just a little bit better to be very clear in how they present the gospel. So, but that's not what's memorable. That's okay. I think what I wonder is, what is the biggest impediment to people accepting the gospel, and how can missionaries overcome that? Because, like, here I'm looking at this historical perspective of them being in what would become Moab, which is the Elk Mountain Valley, and the Elk Mountain Mission. And I look at the natives that are joining, and for them, it's likely they just viewed it as, hey, this is the ritual you do to join the tribe of the missionaries. Well, that's true in a way. But the question is how can they, like any convert to the church, how can you help them understand, hey, the idea is to live the way that Christ talked about, to show love, to show forgiveness, to uplift your neighbor, to be self-sufficient and help others be self-sufficient, to help people in mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, all ways, to, even though you're trying to help people become self-sufficient, that you always try and help others reach that. So in a way, you're doing both at once, being self-sufficient on the one hand, but also being loving and uplifting and enriching on the other. It's not like, well, I'm independent, so you have to be independent. It's along the lines of, hey, I'm pretty well independent, but we all need to work together to help everyone be independent. It's like this wonderful contradiction of terms where you have to be integrated and work with people constantly to all help them all become more independent. So, it's one of those beautiful contradictions that make the world work. And so when I sit here and consider them corresponding with Brigham Young and how they felt at the time, that's all very hopeful. That's actually really great. I'm really wondering how it's all going to go downhill, because that's what they allude to, and I just sit here and go, okay, if they kept Brigham Young's advice, would it make a difference? So we'll see. I mean, it depends. What is it that caused the mission to go south? Figuratively, not literally. And whatever it was, would the advice of live among them, love them, show them that love, show them that the gospel is a good and important thing, would that have helped? Or did it suddenly turn sour because of individual desire, bias, etc.? We'll find out. But I think the same can be said for us. What is it that converted us to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Because even if you're born into the church, per se, you should be converted. I think everyone has their own conversion story, and it's important to understand that. I know for me, it came from understanding that God exists first, and that he loves us, and he loves me in particular, just like he loves everyone else in particular. But the reason I make that distinction is not to sit there and say, well, he loves me, but not you. It's along the lines of, no, he loves me on an individual basis. Instead of having a distant, yeah, God loves all his children kind of view, it's a personal connection, which makes a bigger difference. And I built from there. And it was pointed out that a lot of other people's testimonies may just be a holistic, well, the entirety of everything just makes sense kind of stuff, or that they believe in the Book of Mormon first. And Jacob Hansen made a very good observation that I never knew before, where he said the people who have the strongest testimonies that he knows start with the basis of God first, before the Book of Mormon, before the church, before anything else, and then building up from there. And I agree with him, but of course that's kind of how my testimony started as well, was my testimony in God came first. So I'm wondering if people joining the church, wherever they are at, if that's probably the most important thing that they can have. And it's clear that plenty of them believed in the Great Spirit. The question is how strongly did they believe in the principles that they were being taught. As a spiritual lesson from this, probably think about what it is that converts you, or if you don't feel like you've been convicted or converted or have a strong testimony, I suggest start with how God loves and interacts with you, followed by which act on the principles that he gives and see how it affects your life. And with that, I hope God's Spirit will attend you, continually. And have a great day.